Hello everyone and welcome. Today we're going to be covering some unused ideas, concepts, character models, and more, as well as a lot of information from unreleased or cancelled Zelda games, Twilight Princess 2, Wind Waker 2, and Ocarina of Time 3, or Majora's Mask 2, whatever you want to call it. It would have been the third Hero of Time game. In interviews, Aonuma has mentioned elements and ideas for Wind Waker 2 ended up in Twilight Princess, Phantom Hourglass, and other games. So when looking at beta concepts for Twilight Princess, it's hard to know if it was something carried over from the Wind Waker 2, Ocarina of Time 3, or just the beta of Twilight Princess. I mean, just look at this single image. It's in the Twilight Princess concept artwork, but it looks like concept artwork for Wind Waker. It even has Toon Link with the small pig that Wind Waker fans will instantly notice. This, as well as the other concept artwork you see on screen, such as an official adult Toon Link for Wind Waker, these crazy Midna designs, interviews, and more are what we will be looking into. All of this comes from a mix of interviews from Aonuma, Miyamoto, and others at Nintendo, and secondary material such as Zelda Encyclopedia and Hyrule Historia. But don't worry, we will only be using the information provided directly from Nintendo, such as quotes and artworks, not the made-up nonsense and fan theories from the books. We will be discussing Child Link, Old Man Link, unused Zelda storylines, unused Midna designs and concepts, and much more. To explain all of this, we need to quickly talk about how Twilight Princess began, and the cancelled third Hero of Time game. For everyone who has never heard of the third Hero of Time game, there are a few interviews out there, mostly in magazines, but one popular one that has been going around recently is Aonuma saying, "Back then, we considered making it the sequel of Ocarina of Time. Some years later, we thought of the first-time players, who wouldn't understand a thing if you started as a wolf, so we changed it, and had a human Link from the start." And again, there are other interviews where they mention a third Hero of Time game. And honestly, just by looking at Twilight Princess, it's easy to see all of the connections to Ocarina of Time, and how it could have been a third Hero of Time game. Back then, we considered making it the sequel of Ocarina of Time. Some years later, we thought of the first-time players, who wouldn't understand a thing if you started as a wolf, so we changed it, and had a human Link from the start. So it seemed that even if it would have been Ocarina of Time 3 or Majora's Mask 2, there still would have been this wolf mechanic in the game, and it carried over to Twilight Princess. But at the time, you would have began the game as a wolf, as opposed to beginning the game as Link. But Aonuma thought first-time players wouldn't understand starting out as a wolf, so they switched it so that you would start out as Link, as you do in all Zelda games. Originally, Nintendo was hard at work on Wind Waker 2 when they started getting feedback that basically everyone hated the cartoony art style. Personally, I love it, and still do. This mostly came from people expecting something more like what they had seen from Space World 2000. However, Nintendo was tired of this art style. They used it in Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, and a third time in a tech demo, and they wanted to start with something new. They decided on the cartoony art style of the Wind Waker and loved it. However, a lot of outspoken fans didn't. So they decided to go in the exact opposite direction, making a more realistic Zelda game. Eventually, this leads to Twilight Princess. But before we get there, Wind Waker 2 became a third Hero of Time game, whether you want to call it Majora's Mask 2 or Ocarina of Time 3. It would supposedly feature Link returning from Termina. Where Ocarina of Time featured both child and adult Link, Majora's Mask only featured child Link, but had ideas and concepts for adult Link that eventually became the fierce deity. Wind Waker seen a new form of child Link, Toon Link, but also had ideas and concepts for adult Link, as did Wind Waker 2. Since it had been so long since fans had seen an adult Link, the many concepts and ideas for an adult Link that kept going unused by Nintendo, the insane amount of love and support behind the Space World 2000 tech demo featuring not just adult Link, but the adult Hero of Time in next-gen graphics. Perhaps this is all why Nintendo finally went back to adult Link. In fact, the adult Hero of Time was so popular that he was the one chosen for spin-offs or third-party games such as Smash Bros. 64 and even Soul Calibur 2. With the negativity for Zelda being at an all-time high because of the toony art style, it's easy to see why Nintendo chose to return to the overly popular adult Hero of Time when Wind Waker 2 was cancelled. For reasons we don't know, the third Hero of Time game was cancelled. However, a lot of remnants remained and were brought over to Twilight Princess. First, instead of featuring the Hero of Time, the Hero of Time becomes a secondary character, the Hero's Shade, who is used to teach the new Link many techniques. These techniques are a mix of moves he learned throughout Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, as well as some that were first introduced in the Wind Waker. Most notably, the technique where Link rolls behind the enemy and does a jumping spin attack, which also somewhat resembles his move from Smash Bros. In most Zelda games, Link usually has a trainer. Majora's Mask has the Swordsman, Skyward Sword has 𝐴𝐽𝐽, Wind Waker has Orca, and the list goes on. It's very poetic that in Twilight Princess, a game which began as Wind Waker 2, became Majora's Mask 2, and ended up being Twilight Princess, you aren't trained by a random character, but you are trained by the spirit of the hero who would have been the main character for the previous version of the game. And he is teaching you moves and techniques introduced in the game that came before it. And you also happen to be his great whatever grandson. Going more into combat, it's always been a question among fans. What happened to Zelda and 𝐴𝐴 during Ocarina of Time's missing 7 years? Obviously this happens during the adult timeline, and this cancelled Ocarina of Time 3 would explore the child timeline. However, maybe because of the threat of Ganondorf or a future threat, 𝐴𝐴 would still want to train Zelda in a similar way to how she did in those 7 years. So, perhaps in Ocarina of Time 3, we would have seen how this transformation from Zelda to Sheik would have happened, possibly with Link training alongside them. Twilight Princess did have an unused model of Sheik. We do know that before Midna came into the picture, Zelda would have played a much larger role. This idea of Zelda playing a larger role would have carried over to the DS games, and even Skyward Sword, which is why in Spirit Tracks, she joins you for basically the entire game as a secondary playable character. The unused model of Sheik ended up being used in Super Smash Bros. However, it's hard to know whether it was made for the third Hero of Time game or an early version of Twilight Princess.
Hey everyone, it's me again, 𝐅𝐴𝐴. I just wanted to say thank you so much for watching this video. And you know what? If you're a fan of videos like this, you should totally subscribe and give this video a like and comment below to let us know what type of videos you would like to see us create in the future. And if you would really like to support all of us here at the 𝐵𝐴𝐺𝐺𝐵 channel, please consider purchasing a 𝐵𝐴𝐺𝐺𝐵 t-shirt or becoming a Patreon at patreon.com/𝐵𝐴𝐺𝐵𝐺𝐵, where you can receive many rewards, such as getting shoutouts, having any topic or theory that you select discussed on the podcast or made into its own video, having your question answered, joining on as a guest on the podcast, and playing with us during our Twitch live streams at twitch.tv/𝐵𝐴𝐺𝐺𝐵, and much more.